No, let go. Somebody help. It was the moment I turned towards home, exhausted from overtime work. Suddenly, I was grabbed from behind and restrained, unable to move freely. Startled, I tried to call for help, but a large hand covered and silenced my mouth. Despite my desperate attempts to escape, I was held tightly and couldn't get away. Eventually, I was dragged into a dark, cramped shed in the yard. I felt my life was in danger. I don't know what to do. Somebody help.
Calm down, it's me.
I heard the voice of the man restraining me from behind as I struggled to escape. Recognizing the familiar voice, my resistance ceased. Tentatively turning around, I saw my brother-in-law Sean's face illuminated by the light seeping through the slightly opened door of the shed.
I'm sorry for doing this so suddenly, but there was no other way.
It was my brother-in-law who had restrained me. His apologetic expression was serious, and it didn't seem like a prank or joke. Seeing me quiet down, Sean gently removed his hand from my mouth. Sean, why? It didn't seem like a joke, but I didn't understand the reason. Just as I asked why he had done this, a rattling noise came from outside. Sean put his finger to his lips to silence my question and glared in the direction of the noise.
Be quiet, they're coming.
Who are they? Confused and speechless, I soon heard voices from the other side of the shed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It gave me the shivers. My name is Christina. I'm a 32-year-old office worker living with my husband, Kevin. We met at a gym we both go to. I was having a hard time figuring out a workout machine, and he came over to show me how to use it, and that's how we met. He was considerate, kind, and had a charming personality, making it easy to connect with him. We were quickly drawn to each other, and it didn't take long before we started dating. Our relationship progressed smoothly. We enjoyed our time together, and I naturally envisioned a future with him. Kevin was on the same page, dropping hints about getting married while we were dating. I vividly remember crying with joy when he proposed. But our path to marriage wasn't smooth. His mom really hated the idea of us dating or getting married. I tried to introduce myself, but she kept turning me away, saying, I can't believe some stranger is trying to flirt with my son. I will never approve of you being with him. Break up with Kevin immediately. No matter how many times I visited with gifts, I wasn't even allowed in her house. Opposition continued for months, and during that time, many things changed. I changed jobs, and my parents passed away, changing my environment. I was getting worn out by all the negativity, and Kevin was feeling the same. Maybe we were just never meant to be together. Just as I was about to give up, Kevin, who had always been rejected about marriage and dating, determinedly said,
I will convince her.
Ultimately, his mom approved our marriage. I hadn't thought she would accept us. Honestly, I was feeling hopeless about our future, so I'm happy things are looking up. When we heard the news, Kevin and I jumped for joy together. And the fact that he had convinced his mother for the sake of our marriage meant everything to me. And so we happily embarked on our path to marriage. But even after marrying, I never met his mom. Our wedding consisted only of taking photos, and we skipped a ceremony. There were no greetings or communication required, and since being driven out, I hadn't spoken a single word to her. Kevin occasionally went back to his parents' house alone, but I always stayed home. I once asked Kevin if I should try to greet her, but all he said was,
Nah, it's okay.
He didn't say it, but maybe his mom was still refusing. Given the strong opposition we had faced, perhaps she hadn't accepted me deep down. Thinking it might be better not to force a greeting, we continued our life together quietly without reaching out to her. Then one day, I received a call from her. She had injured her leg and couldn't walk well. Until now, only Kevin had been called to her house, but this time I was also summoned to visit with him. Meeting his mom, Jane, for the first time in years, I was stressed out. It's been a while, Jane. I'm Christina. My voice trembled slightly with nervousness. Jane, with her leg bandaged, looked at me with the same sharp gaze she had years ago. Yes, it has been a while. I've heard about you from Kevin all this time. Now, Christina, I wasn't too thrilled about you dating Kevin before, but can we just put it all behind us? She smiled encouragingly. Put it all behind us? More like she had been the one refusing from the start, but I stayed silent and listened. It would be nice if we could become a proper family now. Then you'd feel more comfortable living here, right, Christina? She was so firm in her tone, there was no way to disagree. Was she suggesting that I live with her and take care of her? Having been opposed to our marriage and dating, I didn't know her well, and frankly, my feelings towards her were not positive. Yet she was suddenly talking about living together. I couldn't agree to that easily. When she went to the restroom, I whispered urgently to Kevin. I can't do that. It's one thing to visit, but I've hardly spoken to your mom, and she's been against us all this time. To suddenly live together? No way. Hoping he would decline as he had with our marriage, I was surprised when he didn't back down, but instead placed his hands on my shoulders.
Don't say that. Think about it. This could be a chance to deepen your relationship with her. You don't want to keep holding a grudge against her, right?
That may be true, but...
If you take care of Mom, I think she will take good care of you as well. She says she wants to put the past behind us, so I'm sure it'll be fine. She's not the same person she used to be. I'll always be on your side, so let's try our best together.
My husband, who always tries to find a middle ground with me, made it extra tough for me to say no. Indeed, Jane did oppose us from being together in the past, and I don't have a good impression of her. But what my husband says makes sense. I need to make an effort with Jane as well, otherwise our relationship won't get better. Okay, it seems like your mom is having trouble walking, so let's move in together.
Thank you, Christina. That's so you.
Reluctantly, I agreed to live with Jane since my husband was on my side. A few days after deciding to move in, all our belongings were transferred to my in-laws' house. As I was taking some disassembled items to the room, laughing at the amount of piled-up belongings, I encountered an unfamiliar man in his late 30s looking grumpy at the end of the hallway. I gasped in surprise. Who is he? But I assumed he must be a member of my husband's family and greeted the man respectfully. I'm Christina, Kevin's wife. Nice to meet you. Excuse me, but may I ask your name? I managed to greet him, but before I could ask who he was, the man just glanced at me, nodded slightly, and went into a room. I still didn't know who he was. By chance, as Kevin was passing through the hallway to tidy up, I quickly caught him and pointed to the door the man had entered, explaining what had just happened. Kevin looked irritably at the door.
That's my brother.
Your brother? I had never heard about his brother before.
Yeah, he's a hopeless shut-in. I wonder how long he'll stay at home. I really wish he'd leave soon. He's just a nuisance being here. You must dislike having a shut-in around too, right?
His brother's name is Sean. For some reason, my husband really didn't like his brother. Contrarily, Jane adored Sean and had always pampered him. According to Jane, Sean was once a child prodigy, excelling in both academics and sports. But one day he suddenly became a shut-in. While she lamented his sudden withdrawal, she seemed pleased to have her dear son at home and was not too depressed. Sean rarely came out of his room. Hearing about him from both, he seemed unapproachable. Due to his reclusiveness, I rarely saw his face, and whenever I did, his expression was always stern. It almost felt as if he was radiating a stay away from me vibe. I felt a certain dread towards this mysterious, difficult man. Just when I was settling in at my in-laws' house, Jane's attitude went from forgiving to something else. Christina, the kitchen isn't tidied up, and the cleaning here is subpar. Are you really Kevin's wife? Perhaps because of her injured leg, Jane has started leaving all the household chores to me and complained about them. She was recovering enough to walk around on her own, but she showed no signs of doing any housework. Since I was also working, it was difficult for me to manage perfect housekeeping every day. Even when I tried to explain this, she never nodded in agreement. Moreover, she demanded care for her personal needs. The burden kept increasing and became overwhelming. Reluctantly, I told Kevin, "I'm busy with work and can't meet your mom's standards for daily chores." But Kevin's response was not supportive.
That's your fault, Christina. No wonder Mom gets angry. Do better next time.
Despite saying that, my husband never actually helped. Despite his promise to try together, it was always me who ended up caring for his mom, as he came home late due to overtime at work. Previously shared household chores now seemed to be ignored under Jane's influence. Kevin had promised to be my ally, but he was now siding with his mom. But that wasn't all.
You haven't finished folding the laundry again. You're useless, Christina. Give me money now.
What? Money? Why?
It's a punishment for not being able to do the chores and for making my mom angry. It's only fair since you couldn't do it.
My income was taken away by my husband for not being able to keep up with the chores. I only received the bare minimum to live on. He took my money away and Jane and Kevin went on a shopping spree while I was forced to live frugally. Although my husband had never been like this before, there was no trace of his former kindness now. Still, I wanted to believe in him. Perhaps he was just temporarily influenced by his mom and he would return to his old self. Believing this, I continued to finish up various chores after Jane and Kevin had gone to bed. One night, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Sean appeared in the dimly lit hallway. "Ah, Sean. Sorry it's late at night. Did I disturb you?" I was internally shocked to see him, as we rarely met. I had tried to be as quiet as possible, but I was worried that I might have woken him up from his room, which wasn't far away, and quickly apologized.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it.
That was the first time I heard Sean's voice. Until then, he had only nodded, and I had wondered if he could even speak. He spoke in a low, calm voice, took a drink from the fridge, and immediately returned to his room. Even though we didn't really chat and he had this mysterious aura, I didn't think he was as awful as my husband believed. Perhaps unconsciously comparing him to Jane, who's naggy, and Kevin, who's become cold, I felt oddly relieved that he could speak normally and continued my chores. A few days earlier, one morning when I had to leave home earlier than usual for work, I was busily preparing breakfast. "Christina, can you organize this shelf? I want to put in some new magazines I bought. And clean it up a bit while you're at it. Please do it now." She was holding several magazines and pointed to a bookshelf that was cluttered with books and files, usually carelessly managed by Sean. It would take a fair amount of time to organize, but the clock hands were nearing the time I needed to leave for work. I really didn't have any spare time. "I'm sorry, but I have to go to work now. I'll sort out the bookshelf when I come back." "I don't care about your job. I'm having trouble here. Can you organize it now?" I had no choice but to refuse, which only made Jane angry. She could have done the organizing herself. It was me who was really struggling with an unreasonable demand. Even as I prepared for work, she continued to make snide remarks. Not wanting to upset Jane further, I asked my husband, who was leaving later than me, to take care of the bookshelf. But his response was not pleasant.
That was a job Mom asked you to do. If you didn't have time, you should have just woken up earlier. Can you not dump your failure on me?
Kevin made a face of disgust, blaming me as if oblivious to the situation. Jane's foot had healed some time ago, and he still had time before he needed to leave. After all, she's his mom. Why couldn't he just help out when there was trouble? Jane kept pressing for me to hurry. Kevin blamed me for not waking up earlier, and I had to leave the house real soon. "I'm really sorry. I'll definitely do it when I get back. I don't have time right now, so please excuse me." Regardless of what they said, I had to go to work, so I dashed out of the house, escaping the two of them.
Hey, Christina, you're just going to abandon your responsibilities?
"Wait, who do you think you are acting like that?" Their angry voices echoed behind me until the moment the front door closed. Their harsh words lingered in my mind all the way to the office. Worn out from the morning's stress and focusing all my attention on work, I returned home exhausted after working overtime late into the night. My in-laws' house was right there, looking huge and kind of intimidating. I dreaded returning to a pile of household chores. Opening the front door would mean facing those two again. I felt depressed just thinking about going back. Instead of immediately reaching for the door, I took a moment in the garden to breathe deeply and organize my thoughts. I decided to act like I always do when I got back. Huh? Suddenly I was seized from behind and lost control of my body. My eyes widened in shock and I momentarily lost my voice. No! Let go! Somebody help! I managed to squeeze out a cry for help, but as I tried to scream, a hand from behind covered my mouth. No matter how desperately I tried to escape, I was held too tightly. Eventually, I was forcibly dragged backwards into a dark, narrow shed in the garden. The man who caught me was behind me. What'd I do? I was terrified of being attacked.
It's me, calm down.
The calm, low voice of the person restraining me halted my struggles. Tentatively, I turned around, and Sean's face was illuminated by the moonlight seeping through a slight gap in the shed door.
I'm sorry for doing this so abruptly, but there was no other way. I promise I won't do anything to hurt you, so please, trust me and calm down.
His face was deadly serious. It didn't seem like a joke or a prank, so I stopped resisting as he gently removed his hand from my mouth. Sean, why? While I could see his seriousness, I didn't understand why Sean would do such a thing. Just as I asked him, a rattling noise came from outside. It was coming from the direction of the house. Sean put his index finger to his lips to silence me and stared in the direction of the noise.
Quiet, they're coming.
They're coming? As I stayed silent, I could hear voices from the other side of the door.
I thought I heard something. It must be my imagination. She should be coming home soon, but she's late. Really, Christina is worthless, especially at a time like this.
When she gets back, we'll tie her up and make her listen. I'm so tired of being with that girl. Let's get it done quickly. It's Kevin and Jane, tying me up and making me listen. I knew they were talking about me, but what exactly were they planning? A cold sweat ran down my cheeks.
When she returns, let's ambush her. She won't expect it, since she just got home.
I know. We have to do this without letting our guard down. After all, I did accept your marriage, right? Make sure she can't resist, then strangle her. Hearing their conversation terrified me. Kevin and Jane were plotting something truly horrifying. My mind was in a panic. If I had gone home as usual, I might have been killed.
Mom, let's go inside and reconfirm the plan. It's bad if someone overhears us out here.
At Kevin's words, the two entered the house. Hearing the front door close, Sean and I quietly left the shed. My heart was pounding unpleasantly. Relieved that we hadn't been discovered, but still unnerved by their terrifying conversation, I knew that if those two found us, it wouldn't end well.
I'm really sorry about them. I'm ashamed of being their family and for putting you in danger.
Sean apologized profoundly, keeping his voice low. I shook my head frantically. No, it's not your fault. Thanks to you, I was saved. But why were they saying such things?
I'll tell you what I know later. Right now, we need to focus on getting away. Once Mom and Kevin are asleep, Christina, you must escape as soon as possible.
Despite everything, I don't remember doing anything to deserve having my life taken by those two. Sean's face hardened as he said,
Even talking like this increases the risk of them finding out.
He then fell silent. Sean was right. It was time to escape. We swapped phone numbers, and once the lights in the room went out, we silently entered the house. With Sean's help, I managed to gather the ATM cards that had been taken from me and packed the bare essentials to safely escape from the house. We found an available hotel, and I took the next day off work. Early in the morning, I received messages from Kevin and Jane saying, "It's disgraceful not to return home. Come back immediately." I ignored their messages. After settling down, I contacted Sean. I briefly explained the situation, and Sean was relieved to hear I had escaped safely. When I asked what this was all about, Sean's voice grew tense as he explained.
Actually, I overheard Mom and Kevin recently. They were targeting your assets.
Targeting my assets, but my salary has been taken by them. Are you sure? They took away my money, though.
Wasn't there something else? Perhaps a large inheritance from your parents? They were after that.
Sean's words made me realize something. Indeed, there was another bank account. It contained a substantial inheritance from my deceased parents. They were after that inheritance. Sean explained that Kevin had discovered the inheritance when my parents died during our relationship and used it to persuade Jane, who had been strongly opposed to our marriage. Blinded by greed for the inheritance, Kevin and Jane conspired together to lure me in their family under false pretenses, intending to take the inheritance afterward. It felt like the world was darkening around me. Neither my kind husband nor my accepting mother-in-law had truly existed. It was all a deception to seize the inheritance.
I'm really sorry for having such a terrible family. Actually, the reason I became a shut-in was also because of my family issues.
Sean had been overwhelmed by his mother's interference, ruining his job prospects and a potential marriage. Jane had complained daily to his workplace, claiming it was unsuitable, and had harassed the woman he intended to marry. Facing daily harsh words from Kevin, Sean lost hope and withdrew into his home.
But this situation has opened my eyes. If I stay any longer with parents who would harm their son's wife, I'll end up ruined too. I'm also going to leave home like you did.
Sean sounded determined. Fortunately, having been called a prodigy, Sean had talents that made employment easy, and he had some passive income, which he had been sharing with Jane. Kevin was apparently jealous of Sean, who had always been the favored child. Sean will likely recover quickly. I will also take steps to sever ties with Kevin and your mom. Please take care, Sean. I too needed to resolve things quickly. With this, I ended the call and got the divorce papers ready. It was the first step towards separating from them. After staying in the hotel for a few days, I found a new place to live and returned to my daily routine of going to work. I continued to ignore ongoing messages from Kevin and Jane, but the situation escalated. Frustrated by the lack of contact, Jane and Kevin shockingly showed up at my workplace.
That woman, she ran off with our money.
Christina, you're here, right? Let's talk. Your money is my money.
As soon as they barged into the company, they began making absurd accusations and causing a scene. They knocked over plants and banged on the walls, demanding that I come out. Instead of feeling scared, I was embarrassed by their disgraceful behavior. Unable to let this go on, I managed to calm them down temporarily and got permission from my boss to discuss things in a meeting room. Considering I might not be able to handle the situation alone, I invited a respected boss who had been supportive when my parents passed away. He agreed to sit in. Facing Kevin and Jane, I thrust the divorce papers at them. Please sign these. I'm not coming back to you. I had always carried these divorce papers, ready for Kevin to sign at any moment. After I said this firmly, Kevin scoffed at me.
Divorce? Ridiculous. You can't just run off with our money and expect to get divorced. Think you can escape? Just wait and watch.
He slammed the table, shouting angrily. I wasn't intimidated by his attitude. The money you took from me by force isn't your income, Kevin. Besides, the money I get is minimal. Do you seriously believe you're right after doing what you did?
So what? Money between spouses is shared, isn't it?
No matter how firmly I spoke, Kevin and Jane remained unaffected, evasively refusing to sign the divorce papers. I know everything, including your plans to take my inheritance. Kevin and Jane flinched. Their faces seemed to ask, how did you know? They clearly remembered their dirty scheme to seize my inheritance. Will you sign the divorce papers or shall I call the police? Which do you prefer?
Calling the police is a bit...
Yes, you're being dramatic. It's all your fault for running away.
Still, they tried to make excuses. I couldn't believe how they didn't even feel sorry about it. Seeing their twisted expressions, my boss sighed deeply.
Sir, ma'am, from what I've heard, your actions are not acceptable by any societal standards. How could you storm into our company? This is completely ridiculous. We could have considered this an unlawful entry and involved the police already.
As soon as my boss mentioned involving the police, Kevin and Jane turned pale. No more getting away with excuses. Realizing this, Kevin, sweating profusely, frantically scratched his head.
Alright, fine. I'll sign the papers, okay?
He roughly grabbed the pen and scribbled his signature on the divorce form. Grumbling, he kicked the chair and stormed out of the meeting room. Jane quickly followed him out. After all the trouble my family caused, I apologized to my boss, who just laughed it off and told me I could always rely on him. It was very comforting to hear. At least I managed to get the signed divorce papers. This marked a clear path to finally being free, and I felt relieved. Afterward, I decided to hire a lawyer and demand compensation from my husband. It turns out Sean had caught Kevin cheating. The other woman was younger, and Kevin had been visiting a hotel with her on days he claimed to be working overtime. This explained the increase in his overtime. I wasn't heartbroken, as I no longer had feelings for him. Having left me to handle all the household chores and care for his mom while using my money for his leisure, I felt nothing but resentment towards him. The compensation was modest because it was a straightforward divorce due to his fault. But Kevin seemed annoyed just to be asked for it.
What's this about compensation? Christina, you have no right to demand that from me.
You were the one who cheated. Just pay the compensation, please.
What? Cheating is no big deal. You're being petty. Withdraw the compensation demand right now.
Was he not aware of his own wrongdoings? His selfish remarks were unbelievable. Our lawyer standing by spoke up.
The amount is actually quite reasonable, given Christina's generosity. The standard could have been much higher.
Reluctantly not wanting the amount to be raised, Kevin backed down. Please make sure the payment is processed, and from now on stay away from me for safety reasons. While I was subtly mentioning Kevin and Jane's shady schemes, Kevin's expression turned sour, like he just tasted something really bad. I looked at him with a cold, unyielding gaze, feeling justified. Being targeted again was the last thing I wanted. The lawyer nodded in agreement, and we decided to issue a restraining order against Kevin and his mother. Later, I received an update from Sean. It seems he had successfully escaped from that house. His reclusiveness worked to his advantage as he slipped away unnoticed. 2 days after his departure, a frantic call from Jane came through.
Sean is gone. You must have influenced him. It's all your fault.
Calmly responding on the phone, I managed to hold my ground. I haven't done anything. Perhaps Sean's disappearance is due to your overbearing interference. Also, you're supposed to maintain distance as per our agreement, which was explained by my lawyer. After my firm response, Jane, who was furious, fell silent. I ended the call and blocked her number, ensuring Sean's location remained undisclosed. She ought to reflect on her own actions. Sometime later, Kevin, intending to marry his mistress, invited her to live at his mom's house. But his mistress didn't want to deal with Kevin being broke and his mom's attitude anymore, so she dipped. Most likely, he had failed to save properly, expecting to live off my inheritance. Now Kevin and his mom are stuck living together, unable to maintain their lavish lifestyle due to their terrible spending habits. With no one to manage the household chores, their home had turned into a mess. Kevin felt defeated by his messy living conditions and tried to make things right by saying,
I messed up. Can we start over?
But using the restraining order, I promptly refused and blocked his calls. I will never forget their attempt to harm me for my inheritance. Their house is falling apart so bad that now everyone calls it the haunted house. Meanwhile, Sean and I celebrated our new freedom with a toast.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks to you, I can begin fresh with my life.
Sean looks happier and easier to talk to now that he's out of that suffocating house. He's my partner in crime in getting out of that toxic environment. We've escaped that house and are on our way to new beginnings.